Hey, it's Brian Burns. Welcome to this episode of the Brutal Truth About Sales and Selling podcast. Got a great guest today, DW, over at Getaccept. He's got a great story. Long-time listener, I just found out. I had invited him on the show. I had his manager on the show about a year ago, Carl, and we had a great conversation. They're growing like crazy. We're going to be talking about what's working for him and his team. And he's got an interesting story about moving from Australia to the U.S., and he was actually on the Ellen show. He's done some great work on LinkedIn. We're going to talk about what's working on LinkedIn today, what's going to talk about how to get into new accounts, how to stay engaged with accounts, how to close them. I think you're really going to enjoy this interview. But before we get into it, make sure you're checking out nudge.ai, and the coupon code is Brutal Truth. I've got a free course on how I use Nudge. It's at b2brevenue.com. Look for how I use AI to automate my pipeline development. The coupon code for the course is the word nudge. So just enter that. Make sure it zeroes out. Otherwise, you'll be charged for it. So the code is nudge for the course, Brutal Truth for the product. You get a month free of it. The professional version, to monitor those companies that you want to get into. If you're prospecting by hand, you just can't scale. It's a full-time job. You got to automate it with AI. Also, make sure you're checking out Pipedrive. Pipedrive coupon code is also Brutal Truth. And make sure you're connecting up with me on LinkedIn. I really appreciate everybody who connects with me. If you see my content on LinkedIn, give it a little like, a little share. I'm posting videos daily on LinkedIn, as well as Instagram and YouTube. So whichever channel you prefer. And if you see it, you like it, please like it. And if you comment on it, I'd be a friend for life. Also, check past episodes about the August contest that I'm offering up for people who share the podcast on LinkedIn. The screenshot, tag a few people, put some comments. The one who gets the most comments gets a $200 gift card from Amazon. So let's get into this with DW. He's a great guy. He was a little sleepy, so be patient with him. And again, remember, the people I interview are not professional guests. They're just salespeople like you and I. And there's nothing better than learning from other people. And listen to the very end. I'll give you an update on the courses that are just cooking. I hope you're going to take advantage of it. We still got a few slow weeks before the summer comes to an end, and all of a sudden we're going to be in that fall rush. Let's get into it with DW. Hey, DW, thanks for joining us today. As a way of getting started, tell us about yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dailius Wilson, or DW, originally from Australia, and currently I'm running sales and marketing at Getaccept, and loving my time in the US so far.
How long have you been in the US?
I've been here just shy of 3 years, and I thought maybe with my behavior, they might have kicked me out already, but I've been lucky enough to stay and hopefully have a few more years to go as well.
Awesome. And how did you get interested in sales?
It started at a young age. I think I have to put it down to my father's influence. He was VP of sales at HP for APAC.
Yep.
So I grew up listening to his calls, and then as I went through, I thought it was a natural fit because unlike other occupations where you have to do a lot of time and there's a lot of changing of the guard, sales is a pure meritocracy. So if you perform well and you're the leader in the team, you can go from a junior member all the way to senior leader in months or even just a year. So I love that side of things.
Yeah, I mean, it's a meritocracy once you figure out the game, I think.
Yeah, that's right.
Usually they don't tell you the rules.
Sometimes it's like a Game of Thrones too, but I think for all intents and purposes, once you find that winning formula for yourself and also the members that you mentor, I think you're always onto a winner no matter where you move to.
Yeah. And your dad on HP, was he on the original HP hardware side, or was it a division of HP?
Yeah, he was more in the software side,
yep.
Always in software. And it was interesting. He was from a technical background, C++ and Java developer, so it was rare to grow up and have that coding background at that time. Now all the young people have really exposed to coding and computing, but I was really lucky to have that right from day one.
And what brought you to the U.S.?
Yeah, I got an opportunity to start as a VP of Sales and Marketing over here for a company, and then this is my third role now in the States. And I thought, after growing a business from 0 to about 32 sales reps back in Australia at a young age, I thought that, if there was any place I was going to try and attempt it, it would be the US, because that's where all the fantastic companies come from, and it also has the best sales culture in the world from what I've seen.
Is it much different than Australia? I've never been. I know it's a beautiful country, and I've talked to several people there and had them on the show. I'd love to visit, except for it's too far.
No, I can look after the audience if you want to get in touch. I know the Qantas team really well.
Yeah.
So I think for me, the main difference between the two countries is structure. I think in America you're taught a very formulaic structure in terms of how to approach sales. I think in Australia it can be a little shotgun from the hip, and we rely too much on the relationship element all the time, rather than building the need and finding that pain that we always talk about. However, if you combine the two, which I'm still trying to perfect every year, I think it's a dangerous approach to have that nice Australian relationship style with the US formality.
And what approach are you taking with your team here? Because you're in kind of a crowded space, a noisy space, and you probably aren't overwhelmed with funding.
Yeah, we've been lucky. I think that funding hasn't been an issue for us, given that we're actually making a bit of money. I think a lot of startups need to take a page out of that book. They're too focused on building product before they actually find that sweet spot to make revenue. For my team, I'm really focused on kind of three main tenets for us. The first is that as a young company, we want to lead with customer stories, and that helps build authenticity because our brand isn't as well known yet. The second is timing. I think most of these other firms, they've grown a little bit larger and then they lose that veracity in the sales cycle. So we want to make sure that we're responding within 4 to 6 minutes at the most, and that gives us a clear point of differentiation. And I think the final point is we talk a lot about in sales about personalization, but what I try and shift the team to think about is humanization. So how in our communications, in our marketing, in our sales, do we appear like real people with a real interest in seeing their business succeed? And that goes further than just saying in an email, I saw you went to X university, or I saw you like pancakes, Yeah. You need to do a lot more than that.
And what do you do then? I mean, because, I say that, a lot of people say that, and then salespeople get stuck in a rut.
Yeah.
They get used to a certain pitch, a certain process, and, clearly it runs its course, and then you have to come up with something new, and they kind of get like writer's block.
Mm-hmm.
What do you guys do?
How do we keep it fresh?
Not so much fresh, but that humanization that you described.
Yeah, definitely. It takes a lot of time to figure out that transition. One of the most important points I talk about, and this is maybe it comes a little bit from the Australian side of me, but humility is an underrated asset in this day and age.
Yeah.
And what humility does is it builds trust from the outset. So, for instance, in a humanization sense, if you're able to share areas of weakness for yourself, if you're able to be, cast a joke or two and be self-deprecating about maybe a little bit of lack of awareness in that product, or being slightly late to that meeting by 2 minutes, it helps that person really see that you're different from the others and that you're a true operator. And then in communications, we want to focus obviously we talk about personal KPIs and then company KPIs in a deal, but we want to focus also on personal interest, and we can do that in a methodical way by collecting what that person likes either before the call or throughout the journey in the CRM. And then we actually schedule up content that not only is about the business value, but also is just along their personal interest to foster that connection. And so we're doing that methodically in our sales process today.
Yeah, it was interesting. I was speaking yesterday to the CRO of one of those online review sites.
Yeah.
And they did a study, and what they found was 4.2 out of a 5-point star rating was the most believable.
Yeah.
Meaning if somebody saw like a 4.9 or a 5, people thought it was gamed. And,
yeah, that's right.
Which it probably was. Let's face it.
And I actually come from that review space as well. That's what my last job was before this.
Yeah.
And I think there's also a real importance to sharing the negatives. So not only do we talk about our personal weaknesses a little bit, but we also, in things like case studies, we actually share those points of improvement pretty transparently. And that's kind of a strange approach. A lot of people ask me, why do you put some of your weaknesses in a case study? And I say, that's exactly why I do it, because no one else does. And no one else is, happy to put themselves on the line like that to acquire new business. And so we look at those case studies as evolving pieces of content where we share how we actually alleviated or improved on those areas throughout the time of that customer life cycle.
And that was another point that came out of that interview, was that if you're in a active sales cycle, meaning that they're in market, they've already looked at one of your competitors, and the classic thing is your competitors will set a trap for you that they expect you to walk right into. And all of a sudden your customer, opens that trap up for you. Well, how do you do this? Now, if you go and try and answer that, we're number one in that area, then they smile and they go, he's lying. But if you are honest and say, that is something that we, frankly haven't done that well.
Yeah.
That it does build trust. And in the same way, we may not be a match for you. I think that builds trust. I think leading with honesty, directness, and that that need to win at any cost. I'll say whatever I have to get the deal. That all of a sudden diminishes you. And I think I have this saying, puts you in the rep zone. And the rep zone is like the friend zone in romance, where like you're participating, but you're not a contender.
Yeah, you don't want to be there, do you?
No, you don't. You do all the work.
Yeah.
You feel like you're going to have the deal, but you don't. You're just there to, compare or entertain until the real winner is announced.
Yeah, I think often many of the listeners will be at a company that's, openly the second to fifth player in its market. So it's not the market leader. And I think there's so many different strategies. You're right. In what we're talking about today, being humble and vulnerable is one way to really create that connection. I think another way is to just show expertise. And if you have deep product knowledge, the way to phrase those kind of rebukes is to say, when you chat with them next, it's important that you ask questions around these three areas, because as a previous user or as someone who studied the space, I think they'd be important to you given what you told me. And so then you kind of let the customer have that conversation with the competitor and set that up that way. And that way it's a little bit less aggressive, but you get the same outcome. So we often do that repositioning quite well here. And then the third way is, we're talking about customer proof, but, you really need to push that. And if you have good relationships with the customers, you bring them in early and just say, don't take my word for it. Talk to, James. James moved from X to Y, and they can share their story and see if it's relevant. So that's how we do it here.
And I think that's a great strategy, because once you're in that rep zone, you can't get out because the trust is broken. They won't tell you because nobody likes to deliver bad news. They'll keep you around until the decision is made. And if you're in there, you're not going to get that open, sincere, accurate communication, which means that you're going to be working off of hearsay or vendor speak or customer backburning. They'll put you on the back burner, turn you on simmer just to keep you warm enough so that you don't go away. Yeah. How about as far as like LinkedIn? You've had a lot of success there. What's your approach there?
Yeah, I think on LinkedIn, it's changed. What happens with LinkedIn is the algorithms are a bit like a young child.
Yeah, sure is.
They're always changing, and so what worked a couple of months ago may no longer work. I had a lot of success when they brought out the article feature, so I'd sit down every day, every business day, and really churn out a piece of content that I thought was valuable based on what I learned from my team. Nowadays, we've seen a trend towards posts instead of articles, so doing long status updates. And then we've seen a trend towards video. So I think it's important to stay ahead of that trend. Yeah. What I'm doing now, which is a little atypical, but you've always got to try and stand out, is I'm using LinkedIn a little bit like how people would use Facebook and Instagram. So I kind of treat my business contacts like family. And so although some people may criticize me for it, I share quite nice videos of some of my adventures. And they're quite well produced at times. And that gets a lot of good feedback because I'm trying to, share a story that working at Getaccept means freedom and enablement to attract talent for us in our stage right now. Yeah. So that's working well. But one other point for the listeners out there is you really need to think of LinkedIn as a funnel, and too much the noise is about exposure and likes and these kind of things. Really, you're only on LinkedIn at the end of the day if you're in sales to book yourself more meetings. I think that's probably a simple but true, version of the story. And you need to be thinking about how does every part of your activity on LinkedIn correlate to meetings booked or pipeline each month or quarter. And for me, I can see all the brands that even come through the general website have somehow liked, shared, or are a friend of a friend through LinkedIn. Yeah. And so I'm kind of keeping a tab on that in a data-orientated sense. So I can see if I'm putting in 10 hours of work into LinkedIn a week and our pipeline's doubled from when I was putting in 5, then I'll continue doing so. So you've got to link this LinkedIn activity to your results and then use data to make sure that you're spending your time wisely.
Yeah, I'm with you there because I've seen Pulse go from insanely effective probably about 2 years ago to almost worthless. A video is very good, and any discussion that engages other people is super good. Yeah. And do you do it just yourself? Do you encourage your team to do it? Is there a systematic approach that you've figured out?
Yeah, so I have a list of about 700 topics.
Is that all?
Yeah, it grows every day. I'd probably add 4 a day. Yeah. And then I still personally manage it. In the past, I've tried to work with consultants. None of that was effective. I feel like being in the trenches and sharing the real stories has been a lot more valuable for me. So I'll do I try to do one post a day and maintain that cadence always. And then if people don't like it or find me too much, I encourage them to unfollow me or unfriend me, because I want people active in my LinkedIn network versus just people who are there for the ride. With my team, it's really hard to teach someone who's, say, 22 and fresh out of college to be a LinkedIn ambassador.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of terrible programs and LinkedIn gurus in inverted commas out there trying to sell solutions to help managers with that. I think the first thing I advocate for them is when they've signed new business, they need to be posting or sharing stories about the amazing things they've learned from that company at least 1 to 3 times in that first year. That is a way to build their relationship with them, and also to share that advice with their greater network, which may help. And then the second thing for the new reps is they all need a focus area of expertise. So some people like calling, other people like sales technology, and then I encourage them to post only on that topic. So they build expertise in one key area rather than branching out too much.
Yeah, and I find that kind of a mystery that people kind of in college or just out of college are just thinking about LinkedIn when they're so insanely active on Instagram and Snapchat, of which, I like, but both have very limited business audience.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is?
Why? I think they're aware of it. I mean, I was a high school debate coach for many years and juggling a full-time sales job. I really liked it. I felt like that was the perfect activity you could do if you want to go into business later in life. And my kids were always getting on LinkedIn at about 19, 20. I just think they still don't understand how to use it or why it's beneficial. But as you're seeing more and more of these individuals, penetrate the workforce, you're seeing the tone of LinkedIn change. You're seeing people sharing a little more of the personal anecdote side. You also see that some of the content that trends there is not to do with business at all. It's loosely connected. So I've kind of adapted my approach to respond to that and to cater to both audiences, because we need to relate to SDRs and AEs a lot, both in terms of our product exposure and acquiring talent. So that's why I kind of feel a trend towards the deformalization of LinkedIn a little more. I think it will become more of a living and breathing social platform over the next few years again.
Yeah, because I think in a lot of ways companies treat it identical to Twitter, where they post the identical press release, blog post on Twitter, and then it goes to the company page. The people who are smart are engaging, with questions, with stories, with humor, and looking to share their lives. Not like Instagram with your picture of what you ate, but maybe a picture like you do of, I think you had one on your boat or one on the beach, showing that you're not a stiff suit, but yet you're not flip-flops all the time either.
You've got to be careful. I mean, I think the internet's a beautiful thing. I think we should all be so grateful that the fact that you and I can chat, and I'm all the way somewhere else doing something else after this, and you'll do the same. And I think we don't stop and appreciate that enough. And so I really want people to see sales as an enabling profession and elevate the profession. And part of that is saying, well, unlike other jobs, now in software sales or online sales, you don't have to work in an office. If you're getting the results, you can be taking calls on a boat in Townsville, Australia, and still, closing business. And that's what I was doing there, mate. I was 4 kilometers out to sea and still had 4G. So I was on there doing some work while my brother and I were fishing. So that's there can't be any bigger dream than that, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think you really brought up the key issue in that people buy from people. People are open to communicating with other people. But so if you treat them like a human being, meaning that you appeal to their interests, their desires, their emotions, you're going to get a whole lot further than just talking about your product and even the industry. And I think that relatability and people getting to know you through your LinkedIn stream, they see you as a human being and not just a pitch person.
Yeah, 100%. And at the same time, though, it comes back to one of the core themes of today's chat, this Australian versus American style. I think the American style and a lot of the schools of thought in sales around, finding the pain and, identifying key metrics. I think those things bring structure to that beautiful relationship. And I've really struggled moving here. I really didn't understand why people wouldn't buy if they did like me. But at the end of the day, it wasn't always because they wanted to buy off who they liked. It was about who they thought they got the best deal from and whether or not that product would suit their needs the most. And so, focusing on those first two is somewhere where a lot of salespeople neglect and also their managers neglect, because they hire people because they're good at talking with others, or they hire them for other superficial reasons. But if you're not hammering down the business value, then it's extremely hard. So I think one thing I've always said to my reps is, some people like looking at things, some people like a story, and the evidence around storytelling and sales. For me, a lot of people just like numbers, and numbers give clarity where it's otherwise absent. So even if you've got a basic product, trying to say in our industry, hey, you do X number of contracts, how long do those take to get back? All right, what's the value of those? So if we decrease that by 10%, it equals this dollar figure. And suddenly that, in addition to everything else, gives them a few more base points of value to start measuring this decision on. And I think that's been a tough thing for me to learn, but something I'm trying to help my reps evolve to.
That's it, because we got to play the whole game. And although the continental U.S. may not be geographically that much bigger than Australia, the cultural differences, even state to state, are enormous.
Yeah. Trust me, I know about that. Doing oil deals in Texas, I had to put on a fake American accent because they didn't understand me anymore.
Oh yeah, you're close to terrorist if you can that. But hey, this has been a great conversation. Where do people go to learn about what you're doing and your company?
Yeah, so I didn't encourage them. LinkedIn's my number one channel. My girlfriend gets angry that I respond faster there than to her text messages. Yeah. But just find me DAILIUS space Wilson on there. And then if you'd like to get in touch via email, it's my first name dot last name Wilson at Getaccept.com. But it'd be a real pleasure to learn about your sales problems, and keep listening to this podcast because, I was at a lower paying job in a small sales company and used Brian's teachings to elevate myself since about 2010. And, I can say this podcast really made a difference for me. So I'm glad you're all listening today.
Hey, DW, thanks for the plug there. I appreciate it. I didn't ask for that. That was a sincere, unsolicited testimonial. But a great guy, obviously having some enormous success. Long-time listener. That's kind of crazy. You've been listening that long. But I love doing this. And this is my 9th anniversary this month. It was 9 years ago. I sat in my kitchen with my MacBook Pro, and I just opened it up and started talking into it. I didn't even have a mic. back then. I put up like 8-minute episodes, much more like the Sales Questions podcast is today, but without a professional mic and the well-polished voice that I have today. My ramblings back then, you can still download those if you'd like. What I was trying to do was, in that time frame, was really just make observations, answer questions, keep it really short. I didn't do any interviews till like 4 or 5 years later, but I'm really loving the podcast. I hope you guys are finding value from it. Please connect up with me on LinkedIn. You are my sales team. If you could just share some of my content on LinkedIn, give it a thumbs up, just hit that little button. I really appreciate the in-messages you send me, but when I get those and I see you didn't like my content, it was like, I appreciate it, but could you just, I like the content more than, meaning you sharing it more than just sending me an email. Why? Because other people see it, and that's how people hear about this, and that's how it's word of mouth. You're the sales team. Okay, I want to also make sure you're checking out Discover.org. They got some great blog posts and co-video. Checking out co-video. This is the year of video email, the year of video in general. I'm having enormous success with video. I'm doing it every day. I go for a walk and a run in the morning. I bring my iPhone with me. I have this little selfie stick with a Bluetooth remote. And I have an index card of like 5 ideas that I have about selling, what I see being done wrong, what I see being done right, what's misunderstood. A little story. I try and keep it under 2 minutes, maybe a minute if I can. I put it on Instagram, YouTube, and LinkedIn. And it's getting a pretty good reception. And it's fun to do. And it's so easy. So you guys are my customers. But think about if you did something like that that's appropriate in your space, whether it's video email, video sharing on LinkedIn. And if you don't want to be in front of the camera, you can do screenshots. You can do, I used to do like pictures on a white background, and you do a voiceover. That's very effective. And whether you put it on YouTube and you send a link, or you send it in an email, or you just have it available as either instructions or a sample presentation for your C-level prospects, whatever it is, it's so much more powerful. Now to give you an update on the courses. We're doing office hours, which has become enormously helpful for people. Everybody's getting their questions answered, and we're getting success. If you listen to kind of the episodes, but also once you join the class, you immediately get access to all of those office hours. So it's becoming this flywheel of knowledge, this community of salespeople building up skills. So it's been going on since January. So now we have, 8 months? So that's, it's about 16 hours of additional content per course. Everyone tells me I got to raise the prices. I'm going to hold them steady probably for another week or so. But then in September, I'm going to have to listen to my students. They're telling me, Brian, you're just giving this away. And I might have to raise the prices. But I'd like to keep it inexpensive. There's a monthly plan, or you can pay all it at once. You can expense it, make it smell like gas, as we used to say. But if you're not overwhelmed, if you're still flying in coach or, God forbid, commercial. Oh, I remember when I flew commercial. Oh, God. All those, the unwashed masses sitting next to me, with me and my lanky legs. You really need to build your skills. And selling is not just knowing. You have to do it, you have to take feedback, and then you have to improve. And I'm doing a lot about the Dunning-Kruger effect. It's this cognitive bias that ends up happening when people become okay at something, or even if they have like a false positive about being good at something. Let's say you have a great year, a knockout year. And this typically happens when you're early in sales. You might luck into it. You might have just worked your butt off. You might have had some bluebirds. Who knows what it is? Or you might have some skill too. And all of a sudden you get a result. Then what happens is people get into this know-it-all phase, and they stop learning instead of where they should be is figuring out how little they know. This is what I every day I'm listening to sales podcasts, psychology podcasts, marketing podcasts, and I'm like, how little I really know. When you have that attitude when you're off field, not when you're in front of a customer, but when you're off field, between, the hours when you're not working, where you can investigate, put together a strategy. The death nail in sales is when you think you know it all. Because what ends up happening is you stop learning, you stop looking, you start pointing when things go wrong instead of looking for how you can do it better. And this is the approach I'm taking in the courses, is break your process down into tiny micro skills, tiny little steps. Focus on prevention versus repair. I talk about this all the time. Prevention is easy. Repair is really hard. And then see what other people are doing, get feedback, take feedback, try again. And this cycle of learning that we're going to get through the course. This is not just videos. And there are tons of videos. But when you do work and you get a result and you get feedback and you develop yourself, it's really a year-long access to this content. If you need more time, I'll give you certainly multiple reduced costs to get it extended. But you really have to commit a year to become fantastic at sales. And if the cost is in the way, you got to ask yourself, how much money are you saving not crushing your number, right? You basically have to close one deal for this to pay for itself. And people are getting meetings with vice presidents that they only dreamed of. So make sure you're checking out the show notes for all the partners. If you happen to hit their website, make sure you're telling them you heard about it from The Brutal Truth. It's this crazy thing like with Nudge. They're like, oh, have Mark McDonald on. I think he even listens to the podcast. And I tell them, I go, he heard about it from the podcast. And it's like, people don't understand that this, having done this for 9 years, that there's some people out there that have been listening for 9 years. And it's a great feeling because it's a great way to connect with salespeople. So my main channel is LinkedIn. I spend most of my time there. So let's connect there. And I really appreciate when you just share a piece of content, even if it's just a like, even if it's just a comment with one of those icons, smiley face or whatever. I appreciate that so much more than sending me an in-mail or an email. Why? Because it then trickles down to your network and people start to see it and become aware of it. The podcast marketplace is getting a little crowded. Everyone's got one, but I'm really dedicated to getting you the very best of guests and content, and I just live for this. So thanks for listening.